so much. That's a very kind introduction. I just wanted to start off with a little story about my family. Once I turn this clicker on. Sorry, could I get some help here?
Are we all good, Ruan? No. Why is it? Do we have an alternative? Oh, there it is.
Oh, there.
There she goes.
Let me try that again. Okay. So I wanted to speak about building the next generation of investors, but before doing that, I wanted to speak about a bit of an older generation, my grandfather's generation. A little bit about my grandfather. He grew up as an orphan, and he was so poor back in rural India that he only had one shirt and one pair of shorts as a kid. And so when his clothes would go to the river to be washed, he would hide in the forest because he'd have, no other clothes to wear, to kind of paint a picture of what he was going through. And through education, he sort of worked his way up and ended up becoming a principal of a small school in India, got his bachelor's in chemistry, and so that was, the big step up for him, and he was the first in his family to buy a bicycle. The second story was from my father, who was, now the son of a principal, so he had a little bit of pressure to do well academically, still living in, below the poverty line in India. And he studied, and through the power of education, he became a software engineer in the late 90s, early 90s, and so, kind of did well for himself, came to New Zealand and was the first in his family to buy a car. My father was the kind of person that would look at airplanes go by and go, what kind of lives must people live to be able to sit on an airplane? Like, that must be, you must be really wealthy, you must be really impressive. So this was quite concerning for me growing up because I thought, they've made so many big strides from when they've started. I'm going to have to buy a helicopter or something at this stage. So yeah, I had a lot of trouble with that growing up. But what it taught me was the power of education, and that education can really uplift not just yourself, but your whole family, your whole community. And so fast forward, I kind of got really interested in personal finance. I found that being a woman of colour, it was one of those things that if you have money and you have more freedom, it's not necessarily about trying to get the helicopter, it's about trying to, be able to take care of yourself, say yes or no to certain situations. So the idea of Girls That Invest sparked from the fact that so many women that I knew, so many intelligent women that I knew, were really good with their money. They were in great professions, or they were studying towards great professions, and yet when it came to investing, when it came to growing their wealth or doing anything more than, putting it in a savings account, there was just no information about it. They didn't know where to start. They didn't think it was for them. And so when I thought of, the idea of Girls That Invest, hey, let's create a media company that talks about financial literacy and reaches these people in a more equitable way, reaches women and people of colour instead of a, blanket, this is what investing is, take it if you want. I was met with a bit of resistance from sort of the male colleagues in my life or the male friends in my life who just didn't seem to quite understand why you needed a woman-specific or people of colour-specific program. And they were like, why are you doing it? It's not going to work. And I was like, wow, you really don't get it. You don't understand like what we go through and the barriers that we're facing are just so different. But we thought, you know what, let's give it a go. We'll give it 2 years and... sorry. There we go. So what ended up happening was it worked out really well. There were so many women around the world who really cared about money and cared about investing. In fact, we became the #1 business podcast, not just in New Zealand, but in Canada, in the US, and the UK. We became a best-selling book. I had a TED Talk in the US, things that you just wouldn't have expected. We got in Vogue. My dad was like, what's Vogue? I was like, it's time, but for fashion, Dad. And so this, to me, is not necessarily about the work we've done, but rather the desire and the need for something like this, the desire and need for financial literacy around investing was so strong that all it took was two of us to go, well, we can talk about what we know, and it absolutely blew up. So what I want to talk to you about is this is what we did in 12 months or 24 months. We reached so many people, but what can we do back home here? How can we all reach more people? How can we get more women and minorities to talk about money, to talk about investing, to have better financial literacy, and to come to you for these services? So there were three things that we did that really, really helped. There were three things that we did that I wanted to share today that you can all take away and implement in your lives, whether you work in banks, whether you're financial mentors, whether you're financial advisors. And this was the first thing that really made a difference. We're not risk adverse. We are just risk aware. And one of the biggest barriers to entry that I noticed and what I wanted to focus on was the idea that we didn't feel like we were being targeted for these kind of services. We didn't feel like financial institutions were trying to show people that look like us in their ads. We didn't feel like they thought we had money or didn't feel like they thought we were worth, speaking to. And so for a very long time, it came across as if, women are a little bit scared. They don't want to invest. I had someone say women don't invest because they don't want to. And that's not the case whatsoever. And if the past slide has shown anything, they're all very hungry and eager and they want to learn. And young people do care about money. A lot of us, are very well aware of the fact that homes are very expensive to buy. We're very well aware of the fact of longevity risk. The idea that we're going to run out of money, yet live quite a long time, live longer than our male counterparts, but have less money to carry us through those years. And so we come to a point where we thought, well, let's change the tone, the language, the attitudes that we have towards women and money. And so it was so extraordinary to start saying, well, hey, look, we get it. You do want to learn. These are the resources. This is the knowledge. This is what you need to know to begin your journey. And no one said, oh, that's too risky. They said, oh, I didn't realize there was different levels of risk. I didn't realize that you don't just have to buy NFTs and cryptocurrency. That's not the only way to, grow your money. There's also things like funds, managed funds. There's also things like bonds. There's, things like term deposits if you don't want to invest it. But there's more of a spectrum or a range of investments. And when you give people education, you give them more autonomy, you give them more choice, and they don't feel like they're being told, go do this one thing. They start to feel like they're being told that there's more range and that they have just a little bit more freedom and flexibility, and that really worked for us. The second thing that really helped, the second thing that made all the difference in the world of how quickly we could reach more people and how quickly people cared about what we did, was the representation that we brought. We had a photo shoot for a New Zealand journalist company, a media company that wanted to feature us, and the photographer came over, they contracted someone out, and he said, no offense, but you don't look like people that run the #1 business podcast in the country. And he didn't mean it in an offensive way by any means. We definitely weren't offended, but I think it spoke to more of the fact that it's not usual. You don't usually see two young brown women talking about money and reaching all these people, and it felt almost audacious to call ourselves investors. It felt almost audacious to say that we were, doing what we were doing. But we have had so many people come to us and say, we just felt represented. We just felt there was a face that looked like ours, someone of our age, someone that talked like us, someone that used Kardashian references when they talked about investing. And it sticks and it works. And so that's really one of the key messages that I'd love to share with you all. If you do have more people of different backgrounds that represent different communities, then you're going to reach those communities a lot easier. I used to work in healthcare before I came into this position, and in healthcare, I used to be an optometrist, very, very different, very left-wing from here, but I found that in the healthcare sector, if we wanted to reach people of certain ethnicities, we needed to hire more people of certain ethnicities. If we wanted to reach, more rural people, we had to hire people from rural backgrounds. And so in the health sector, we had schemes to have more people come in from rural backgrounds, more people come in from communities that were minorities, and those people would go back to their communities, they would connect with them more, and then the health outcomes of those said communities improved. And so if we want to improve financial literacy among women, if we want to improve financial literacy among people of colour, then we need those faces not just at the back end of our businesses, but at the front end as well, also at the top end. We need these kinds of people that share their ideas, share their values, and go, hey, this is how we do things in our culture. This is how people respond to things. And that has probably been, it's a second point, but probably the most important point that has helped. I've always wondered, we often ask people, why us? What is it about us that makes you want to listen to our brand? We've had almost 2 million downloads, and that blows my mind. Why anyone would want to listen to us that many times? It doesn't quite make sense. We had someone that said they, drove from Auckland to Wellington, and she just listened to the podcast on repeat, and I couldn't think of anything worse. So I asked her, I was like, what is it? And she said, it's because you're relatable. It's because I feel like I'm talking to a friend, and I don't feel that intimidation. That intimidation barrier really comes down. We don't think of ourselves as intimidating, but even things like wearing a suit and using certain words, certain jargon, can really put the average person off. When you're in the industry, you don't feel that way. It's a little bit like talking to a lecturer. They're so used to their speak and their profession, and they're so smart that it's almost difficult for them to, bring it down to simple language and simple terms, but it really, really adds up. The third thing that helped, the third thing that made a huge difference was speaking people's language. Now, this is a little bit different to the jargon that I was speaking about. This is more understanding where people are coming from in terms of what drives them. For a long time, I thought what drove people was money. I mean, it makes sense. If you're trying to learn about investing, you probably want to learn about making more money. And was not that. And so we thought for a long time, how do we get people to care or understand? We talked about inflation, and they're like, that, okay, fair enough, but that doesn't really drive me. We talked about, goal setting. It's going to help you reach maybe your goals faster. And again, it was like, well, I'm 20, my goals are further away. It's not a big deal. And so we were really stumped on how do you get people to care about financial literacy? How do you get them to care about the things that, are important? Because the way that we had been taught, when we were younger and we were learning, was a very male-centric view around, you've got an individual view, you've got a view of yourself, you've got to make the money, it's for you, it's for, X, Y, Z reason. There was a lot of focus on supporting your favourite CEOs like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and I can't say a lot of us related to that. And so it really left us stumped. But the third thing that really helped us reach so many people, not just in New Zealand, but around the world when it came to financial literacy, was speaking their language. People care about money because they care about growing generational wealth. They don't care about making their bank accounts fat. It's about how can they help their families? How can they help their communities? We had people caring about sustainability and how can you use your dollar to make change? How can you vote for things that you really care about? At the end of the day, it's all very fun to go to a company and protest, but companies only care about two things. They care about their shareholders and they care about their customers. And if you're outside their door protesting, they don't care too much. One of my co-founders, Sonia, she used to work in a building that was shared with Fonterra. And she would say, so many people would come with signs and they would be yelling things, but Fonterra workers wouldn't be in there those days. That it was not reaching the right people. If anything, the Southern Cross workers were kind of having to hear it. And so it wasn't as effective as you'd like to think, it would be. And so what we found is that people really cared about the idea that they can vote with money. It's not something that's evil. It's not something that if you take from someone, it goes to someone else and it's, not to be shared. There's this idea that we've seen amongst different cultures, different communities, and often communities that are, people of colour, you could say, they have more of a collective approach. They don't just see my money is my money, it's my money is my family's money. My money is to be shared, it's for my community, it's for the people I care about. And when you add that element to it, some of our best content that was ever created, or the best content that was well received, was the ones around generational wealth, or the ones around sustainability, and also ethical investing. I don't think that's a new one. I don't think ethical investing is something that is a groundbreaking piece of research to say that young people care about it. But it goes to show that the right language really starts to add up once you start to see that if you speak to them in the way that they like, they're going to respond so much better. One of my first experiences with a KiwiSaver provider was when I was 16, and all I recall was, sitting down at the bank, feeling very intimidated. It was a man in a suit. Not to say he should have worn jeans or he should have, been more casual or cracked a joke with me, but I didn't feel a sense of, comfortableness. I didn't feel like I could have asked him any questions. And rather than explaining to me that, hey, look, KiwiSaver is the scheme where you become an investor, your money is going to be put into this thing that grows over time, he kind of just told me what he was going to do, and he said, well, based on your age, I'm going to put you in this fund. And by all intents and purposes, he was doing the right thing. It was the right fund for me. It was the right time for me. But I felt like I was being told what I should do instead of being part of the conversation. I didn't feel like there was any, questions around, do you understand what I'm saying? Hey, do you mind if I can just take a second and make sure that you're aware of what's going on? And so I left that conversation feeling quite silly. And when you think about it, if you're 16 years old, of course you don't know what KiwiSaver is. Of course you don't know the difference between a managed fund or, a fund that's more conservative versus an aggressive fund. You're just not aware of these things, and yet no part of me felt like I could have asked that. And so if we start creating more, language that makes people more comfortable, less jargon, we try and avoid the jargon as much as possible. If we start talking to people in ways that they can relate to, it makes such a huge difference. If you have more people that look like you, or just people that you can see yourself in a relatability sense, it really adds up. I never realized how important relatability was, but a few weeks ago I had a meeting, and I was on holiday, so I turned up to the meeting in jeans because I thought, there's no need for me to change. And at the end of the meeting, the team said, hey, do you mind if we take a photo? We'd love to put it on our social media. I thought, why not? They were all in suits. I was in jeans and a nice top and some sneakers. And I thought, I probably look a little bit underdressed. And yet, for some reason, we had so many messages. And it really blows my mind. We had so many messages from people saying, wow, I just love that you can turn up to these meetings in jeans. I just love... and I guess it still baffles me, but what I'm trying to get from those kind of conversations is that people just love to see people that feel like them, that look like them, and it makes all the difference in the world for them. And if there's anything that I have learnt from this experience, it's that it's not an uphill battle. It's not a battle where we're trying to force young people to care about money. It's not a battle where we're trying to get them to do something that feels uncool to them. They're there. They want to learn. They are waiting for your services. It's just a matter of trying to reach them halfway in perhaps a way we haven't, been trying as well in already. But that's everything from me today. Thank you for your time.
Beautiful, Sim. We have some questions coming in for you, so let me give those to you. What do you see? What do you see for the future of Girls That Invest? Where does it go from here?
Well, the book did just come out a week ago, so in the short term, we're going to North America next week to do our book tour there. We just finished up in New Zealand. And where to from here? I think the long-term plan is really just getting rid of that investing gap. Right now, we are looking at, not as many women and people of colour investing in the stock market, investing in homes, investing for their future and their Kiwi savers, as much as their male counterparts. And for me, when that number is equal, I think our work's done.
Yeah, amazing. Can I ask how you cope with the celebrity of it all? I mean, yeah. See, look at that face; it's beautiful. But you can quite calmly, casually say, "So we're off to North America this week, next week, and we launched a book, and it's a bestseller." Your life has changed. How do you cope with that?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I guess if you enjoy what you do and you've got a mission behind what you do, one of the things, probably should have been the fourth slide actually, is if you've got everyone together with the same mission, it's pretty easy. Everyone that's part of our community online or in person are people that either want themselves to improve or they've got partners or children that they want to kind of get, more financially literate. So I think it's, if it's a simple and easy mission that everyone's on, there's not too much friction.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally your message, isn't it? That it's the collective good that this is all about. It's not about you becoming the new Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Yuck. Oh, just horrible. Anyway, knowing that the richest 10% of the global population owns 76% of all wealth, do you think that voting with your wallet is a reality?
I think it's better than standing outside Wanterra with a sign that's not reaching anyone. I do appreciate that, we are all, one drop in the ocean, but at the end of the day, these things do matter. Shareholders do care about the everyday investor. They do care about what you've got to say. And if you start to see, companies changing what they do based on it, if you think about what's happening with, if you're into cosmetics, you might have noticed over the last couple of decades, we went from, it was normal to test on animals. No one blinked an eye on it. And now everything's cruelty-free, everything's vegan, it's stock standard. It's almost like embarrassing at this stage if you still make lipstick that tests on animals. And that came from consumer demand, people saying, actually, I won't buy from you if you keep doing that. And investor sentiment and investor demand isn't any different.
That's a really great answer. What piqued your interest in financial capability? Was it offered at your high school as a topic?
No, so I was quite privileged. I went to one of the best public schools in New Zealand, Westlake Girls. So one of the biggest schools in the country, the biggest girls' school in the country, a really high decile filled with, lots of different ranges of people. We had people that would donate $10,000 just because they felt like it for their children. So, really well-funded school. And not a single class was ever given on financial literacy. So if that's happening at the top end of the country, I don't want to know what's happening, everywhere else.
Yeah. What is the most common way you recommend people invest? What vehicle?
Well, we don't recommend anything. But we do talk about what's out there. And so it's kind of saying, here's a menu, here's a list of things, here's a list from most risky to less risky, and kind of work out your own risk profile. But it's just about knowing what's on the menu. You can't order from it if you don't even know, what those words mean. It's like going to a fancy restaurant and everything's in, French.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you grow GTI so fast?
So I guess the 3 points that I spoke about was probably the main thing. But if you believe in a mission and very strongly hold onto it, I think it speaks volumes and it goes a long way. And like I mentioned at the start, there was quite a bit of friction amongst some of my male colleagues about, why something like this would even exist. And I have a strong belief that if there's something that you think needs to happen, then you don't always have to take on feedback. Feedback is good, but it's not always right. And so there would be feedback at the start where, we were a number one business podcast in New Zealand. I reached out to media. They were like, that's cute, like, congrats. But we're not going to cover it. Then we got to number one in the States and everywhere else, and they still said, we'll think about it. It's not really worth covering. And it was me just relentlessly going, no, this is worth covering. This is really important. And I think a lot of why it grew so quickly was just the willpower to keep pushing an important message.
Yeah, amazing. This is a great question. How can we make sure staff don't think new staff of colour are the cleaner? My husband is a Māori senior 3D visual effects artist at Weta. That's way too much information, but hey, we've done it now. And is often mistaken as the cleaner.
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's just, rather than assuming or wondering or worrying about how you're treating people, just ask them. I think people are pretty open to you going up to them and saying, hey, is this work, helpful? Is this the work you want to do? Or are we just throwing things on you that make you perhaps feel like you're ticking a box, rather than worrying about what they might think or might assume? We're all people. You can still go up to someone and make sure that you're having a good conversation with them about it. I think communication is always the answer.
Yeah. What is the biggest challenge you have faced?
I think the biggest challenge I faced personally was trying to have the brand be taken seriously at the beginning, because at the end of the day it is two young people that don't necessarily look like your everyday person talking about investing. We don't wear suits. It's almost become like a non-suit company at this point because of how much people loved us wearing jeans in that photo. But what I think really helps is just making sure that you're always, talking to people, making sure that you're always kind of keeping your, finger in the pies, or keeping your ear to the ground, just trying to make sure that you know what people are after and staying as relevant as possible.
Has it been tricky in the last few years with, COVID and Ukraine and inflation and all of those things? Has that changed the way that you are thinking about investing?
So this was actually a poll that we put out to our community. One of the best things about having a large community is you have a large database. So we always go, what do you think about this? What are you all doing? And one of the things that we spoke about when everything was doing well in the stock market was the idea of, well, when things don't do so well, we're not actually changing our positions. We are of the belief that it's the slow and steady and the buy and hold, and it's not the quick bucks that you make off a few shares in a couple of days. And so we wanted to know what people were doing, and 91% of our community, young women, said they're not doing anything different during the market because they know it's the long-term strategy. And so that was really impressive. Yeah. And it goes to show, we're not holding a gun to their head and saying don't sell. It's just us saying, this is what the studies show, this is what the research shows, this is what the data shows, and everyone's intelligent enough to work out that that's probably what they should be doing as well. So it's just the financial literacy piece is so important. It makes such a difference.
That's really great. You know your community really well, and you're really active with social media. Do you know if there are very many men in the community? Do they follow?
Yeah, so around 8% of our community are men, so not a lot of them, but we have a community of around 200,000, so you add it up, it's a decent amount.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that also don't identify with either gender, and they make up a decent part of our community as well. I don't think investing is just for men and women or anyone else. It's just we take a more equitable approach. Before us, there have been brands that have tried to reach financial literacy to everyone. And one of the brands before us, they released a stat to say that 80% of their community was men, even though their branding and their speaking and everything was not necessarily positioned towards men, but it just goes to show that even when you take a neutral approach, you still have men going in those spaces. I don't know why they shared that statistic. It's a bit embarrassing, honestly. But it goes to show that if you take a more equitable approach and actually focus on those communities that need it the most, 92% of women, almost 2 million downloads, you really think about how many people you're reaching. Just by saying that you're girls that invest.
Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you so much, Simran Kaur. Massive round of applause. What a wonderful job you do.